95% of everything we do as human beings is emotionally based.
When you show up for people, people show up for you. Whether or not you're not asking for it, they're not asking for it.
Once you've created those emotional connectors, it opens up space for things that can happen in ways you'd never expect.
A lot of what we remember most vividly in life isn't necessarily the biggest thing that's happened to us. It's the moments that made us feel something. A concert, a wedding toast, a street celebration after a championship, a late night conversation that somehow changed the direction of your life, the first time you felt like you belonged somewhere. In their book, The Power of Moments, Chip and Dan Heath explore why certain experiences rise above the blur of everyday life and become lasting memories. Their argument is deceptively simple. We don't remember life evenly. We remember emotional peaks, moments of elevation, connection, insight, and pride. So what does that mean when we think about place? For many of the ways we measure the success of place, foot traffic, sales tax revenue, occupancy rates, economic output, those metrics rarely capture the thing people are actually searching for, the feeling that a place somehow becomes part of who we are. And maybe more importantly, the moments that create those feelings. My first guest today is Molly Alexander. Molly has spent years thinking about the emotional life of places and organizations and the idea of return on emotion, the belief that some of the most important value created in cities, districts, and stores can't always be measured transactionally because it lives instead in memory, attachment, ritual, and shared experience. This is my conversation with Molly Alexander.
Well, good morning. I'm Molly Alexander, and I live in Elgin, Texas, and I actually own a couple of businesses. One is a retail store called Elgin Dry Goods, and the other is a consulting business called Imagine the Possibilities, where I work with communities and people around the country to really foster and execute on their dreams.
And you have worked in the world of place management for a long, long time and really understand what makes a place work, both on a retail store level to a city, right, and everything in between. Are we measuring the wrong things? And why are what we measure when we're measuring how a city works or how a district works? Why is our traditional measurement system insufficient?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So in the realm of economic development, community revitalization, downtown revitalization, we have a series of stakeholders, and we set up programs and funding mechanisms to support what we believe and know are really important to our communities. And oftentimes we forget that part of our stakeholders is the community and the members who we see on the street every day. But we set up those metrics for who's funding us. I mean, it makes sense. Whether it's property owners, business owners, and or local government officials, depending on the program, we set up metrics that are important to us together, whether it's creating jobs, because that's part of our role, revitalizing storefronts, bringing in new businesses, raising property values. This idea that if we're doing things right, we're increasing taxes that then can be used in the entire community. And they're not bad measurements, but they're missing an element of measuring community at a level at which our work is supposed to enhance, and that's just our human experience. And it's hard to equate quantitative and qualitative measures and do it in a way that you can communicate it easily.
Right.
So it's not wrong, it's just not enough.
When we talk about measuring qualitative issues, you've talked about this concept of ROE, or return on emotion. Say more about that.
Yeah, sure. So 95% of everything we do as human beings is emotionally based. And so researchers, psychologists have been trying to figure out how do we measure that in a way in which we can align our outcomes with emotional drivers. So there are 13 emotions. There's probably on the spectrum, 50 or more. But when we think about the psychological aspect of, anything from fear and love and everything in between, we are triggered by those emotions as human beings. And so when I think about place and I think about, as an example, a retail store, what are the most important emotional triggers that I can connect with another human being that will enhance their experience? And so I took those 13, I worked with different folks in the social psychology world and really drove down to the three most important ones that would enhance the human existence. And the first one is joy. So, that idea that we spark a joy, it makes us happy and we have a smile on our face. That really enhances our moments as humans. Those moments of joy really change our condition. If we're unhappy or we're blue, those sparks of joy really have huge, meaningful moments in our daily existence. So, joy is critical. Second one is trust. This idea that it's trustworthy, it's safe, I can be there. From a store standpoint, your product is worth my time and my money. If it's community driven, I'm safe. I'm not going to fear my life or I'm not going to fall in an open pothole or, I trust that it's a safe place to be. And that idea of trust can be easily broken and has to be reconnected on a regular basis because trust, once broken, is hard to re-achieve. So, recognizing we have to have a trustworthy environment is critical if I'm going to go spend my time there. So, joyful, you make me happy, you bring a smile to my face, these unexpected experiences, and trust. I know each time that I come back that trust will build over time. And if pieces are broken, periodically, we've built a level of trust that I might come back. So it's this idea that it's trustworthy. The third and most important one is a sense of belonging. So, as we all know, we try to build these inclusive communities, but truly, as a human being, I belong there. In community, if you think about it, let's just say you move to the community and it's so hard to make new friends, particularly as adults. And so, this idea that it's warm and welcoming and a sense of belonging really starts at the heart of who community is and what community stands for. And it's this idea that I walk in and someone says hello, someone says welcome, someone says, hey, come volunteer on my committee, and I'm being heard. I can get my hands dirty, I can shape the community along with others. But this sense of belonging is huge, and we know it even more today just because of high suicide rates and loneliness. People just aren't connecting at the level at which they need to feel worthy and feel like their life has meaning. So those are the three core emotional connectors I think are really, really critical in building places.
So you talked about, I want to talk about all of those. Like when you talked about belonging, some of what I heard is a little bit about ownership. I think there's a difference between being welcomed somewhere and belonging somewhere. What is that bridge? Because when you walk into a place and it's nice and you're greeted and you're welcomed, that's lovely, but it's not necessarily get you to the place of belonging. So what is the difference there to bring you to that feeling of belonging?
Yeah, it's a two-way street. So, it has to be open. The environment has to be open enough that if I'm walking into it as a new person or as a community member, I feel like I can have a conversation or I can connect. So it's truly in a retail store or an environment, it's really training team members that this is your home, essentially. Everybody who comes in here and walks through your front door is welcome. And then how do we build relationships? And so it's the environment in which we create. And so I'll give you the example. Our first retail store was a wine bar home goods store. And our mission was this is an extension of my husband's and my living room, and everyone is welcome. You could buy wine and beer in the middle of the store and have an appetizer, but most of our business was retail driven for you buy a couch or home goods, jewelry, candles, that type of thing. But what I didn't quite understand when I first opened the store is that when people would walk up and get a glass of wine, what they really needed was someone to listen to. I didn't understand the role of a bartender until I was one, where I just thought I'd be selling wine and beer and it would be a fun environment like I'm a hostess in my own home. This is wonderful. But what I didn't know was that when people came in, particularly by themselves, they just wanted someone to listen to and to build a relationship with. And it really cued me in very quickly that we don't have places where we can go and be safe and have a sense of belonging and that someone will listen to us. So finding places where we can be who we are, getting past those places are really important. And they're not every business. Not every business has the ability to do this, but I think every business could have the premise that that's where we're going. And every place, if we recognize that everyone at at the very basic level, we're emotional beings. Sometimes they're bad emotions, sometimes they're just hard emotions, and sometimes they're, you know, elated, or exuberant emotions. And how do we make sure that we create places and environment that we recognize that people are human and they're emotional and we want them part of our community?
Right. Well, and it's interesting, it feels like these 3 emotions you're describing are all so tied together in they feed on each other in a lot of ways. I spoke recently with Jay Pitter about the work she's doing in public joy, in her book Black Public Joy, and one of the things she said is that public joy is as essential as justice. Right,
Mhm.
and thinking about how the stewardship of joy is such a powerful tool for creating belonging and trust. Do we undervalue joy?
I don't think it's undervalued, I just don't think it's thought about, intentionally. So, whether that's undervalued or not, I just think oftentimes we forget the intentionality of it. So, I mean, here's the thing, we've all gone to a place that there's just I always say it's that unexpected happening. That just all of a sudden you've landed on it and it's unexpected and it just is so wonderful. It's like, "Oh my god, that parade, I had no idea it was happening," or the musician or what have you. There's these triggers, and we all have different kinds of triggers, but it's these moments that we're like, "These are just so wonderful." And for oftentimes in place management, we get so caught up in all the things we're supposed to do that I think we tend to forget that at a basic level, it should be work of joy. The people we work with, the people we work for, and the community that we're building should truly start at, "We are doing this because we wanna build a better place that is full of joy for everyone." So, I don't I just don't think we talk about it. So, I talk about it in, organizations' mission and vision. And if the word joy or the intention of joy is not in your vision and mission statement, then I don't think we're leading organizations with intention of creating places that have lasting value and people care about.
In terms of operationalizing joy, for example, or really any of these emotions, the foundation of having it in your mission vision makes a lot of sense. If it's not there, you're probably not working towards it. But how do you put it on the balance sheet? Like how do you put it in the work plan?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it has to be in the vision and mission, and it has to be at the core of the community's core values. So, it has to start within, it has to start with the people we hire, and it has to start with the cultural leadership of the CEO. If the CEO, profile is not joyful and or doesn't recognize that when people come to work, they should be excited, and we foster those relationships of trust, a sense of belonging and joy at home in our own house, then we're not gonna be able to build teams where we're doing that for the community. So to me, it's essential there. And oftentimes, having worked with large business improvement districts, many of the members of the board are very real estate driven and numbers driven. Not that that's not joyful. We all want to make money, and have a sustaining life. But we don't come with the mind frame oftentimes, joy seems to be fluff. So it's also about how we set up the metrics, how we set up the conversations, and how we set up look, if we're bringing people back over and over and again because they love this place, they love it, then everyone will be happy. The people who are coming here, the people who have invested here, people who have businesses here. And I would even say that we're building a better holistic approach to community building. Now, oftentimes people from a standpoint of black and white or, the balance sheet, P&L, joy doesn't show in the P&L, I don't have a profit and loss statement that says joy, but I do have metrics of customer satisfaction. So if I own a building and I have residents or office and or retail or all the above, I want my customers and my clients very happy. So I do things to make sure that they're happy. I create an environment in which they want to live or work, and or own a business. And so when we begin to think about how we translate the messages, we have to think about who our audience is. It doesn't mean that the property owner doesn't recognize joys as important, but how does it translate on the P&L? How do we begin to have these kind of conversations that have meaning in the conversations we're having so people understand what we're talking about? Joy is not just an emotion that we feel good about. Joy is emotion that translates into making a better place. And that oftentimes means, raising the values of everything in terms of a positive way. Everybody wins.
Is trust a byproduct of joy and belonging, or is belonging a byproduct of trust? Like, as kind of moving forward to, I want to create a place where there's emotional attachment to the place. Where is a starting point if somebody's trying to create attachment?
I don't think any are a byproduct of the other. I think they're strengthened through one another. So our emotional attachment is strengthened by these three emotions as well as other emotions. I mean, if you think about fear just on the spectrum, joy and fear are two very strong emotions. If we tap into fear in people, then it breaks down um, the other emotional connectors that we need as humans. So I think it depends on how we lean in and where we lean in. I use a scorecard. It's hard to start this conversation typically organizationally from an organizational management standpoint and even with a business. So I've been working with a retailer in Colorado Springs, and we really talk about joy, trust, and a sense of belonging in ways in which, what does the storefront look like? How are you greeted when you walk in? What's the customer experience? What's the layout and design? How do I navigate? What are the senses and the smells? How do we wrap all of this into this experience where people are really feel like they can build a community in this store? And I think the same holds true in an organization. So let's say we have some new hires, but we haven't really defined this culture. Is this a joyful place to work in? Is it one that I can trust my coworkers and I can collaborate? Do I have a sense of belonging here? And how do we do that? And I really think that, once again, that's really critical to delivering on it. I do that in any business. So we tend to grade ourselves. So I work with staff to lay out the premise, and then we work together and say, okay, everybody score it. And everybody scores a little differently. Some people feel more joyful at work than others. Some people feel more trust in an organization. And we have that dialogue. We have that discussion, and we go through and do teams. So it's really has to come from the top. CEO is the one that, I always say, the fish rots at the head. And if the CEO isn't prepared, then the whole fish is this, we can't feed the community. I mean, if we take some metaphors here, if the fish is unhealthy, we can't really feed the community the joy and the trust and the belonging that we need. So I think it has to start within any organization, a business owner. The one that I was working with this week in Colorado Springs got it immediately, and really, it takes time to build the trust with your team that they think it's okay. So it takes a while.
Is there a risk? It feels like there's a fine line of designing for emotion and being manipulative. Is that a
Mhm.
risk of, if you're doing this work, is that about authenticity, or where does that come in?
I mean, obviously, there's a risk if you're dealing with emotions. And so I think it just depends on style and leadership intentions and how people understand building great organizations. I don't think if you have an area of mistrust, you have an opportunity to really build something great. It might be great for the bottom line because people are so competitive with one another. You're driving sales and you're making more money that way, but the lives of the people that are working for you may not be enhanced. But then there's this sense of, okay, well, how can I do this better? And you're not going to be perfect. It's not going to be joyful every single moment of every single day. But if we can begin to have the conversations, then we can drive in deeper. Okay, oftentimes when we are employees and we're coming to work, that's not the first thing on our mind. We have kids, or we have older parents, or we have financial struggles. And sometimes we just need to meet people where they are so that they have an ability to be able to come in and build teams and build success and manage their stress in their daily lives. And giving them some of those tools, I think, is critical. That's all we can do. And building a better community means we build, in my opinion, first with a better team.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I was thinking about that as you were talking about how emotion is so personal, and we're all going to have a very different emotional experience or emotional reaction to the same environment and same stimulus because of what we bring to it. a place can be economically very successful without being emotionally successful. Is there a void just for the organization or place, or is that contributing to something larger outside of that place that's missing?
I mean, I think it's a really tough question. I don't know if I can just succinctly answer it. I mean, it's a great question. Places can do financially very, very well and be quite sterile. And I think that in my experience, so this is not some researched global trend, but here I'm going to give you the example that kind of I lived through. So I'm a Gen Xer. And so when I started working in downtown Austin in 2000, it was a very different environment than it is today in 2026. And so when we think about, it was a very traditional environment of bringing in corporate headquarters and or businesses, filling the office space, and then essentially the first floor in some instances was just convenient space for the office, dry cleaners or a coffee shop, but not really built in context with the rest of downtown of how we might leverage the benefits. Our entertainment districts were doing great, so we had a nice nightlife. And as the second wave of technology, after the dot-com bust really became apparent, it was businesses began to choose relocations differently because they needed to attract a workforce. And so Austin was at the top of the list, as were many other cities, because there was a lifestyle in Austin that people were attracted to for a millennial generation. And that generation, who was influenced by MTV Real World and Friends and other things, wanted to live in an urban environment or near it so that they could really create a life around where they worked as opposed to having work and life very separate. It was an integrative. And I'll never forget in about 2007 or maybe it was 8, maybe it was even 2009, I had a leasing agent, pretty prominent on my board at the time, say, "What do I do? These employees wanna bring their dog to work." I'm like, thinking to myself, "Well, why are you asking me?" I said, "Well," he said, "We don't allow dogs." And, so that was the first conversation. We were doing retail recruiting, and about 2009, we brought a really hip, cool coffee shop to his Class A building, and he said to me, "I don't it's a great coffee shop, Molly, don't get me wrong, but I have lawyers and Class A tenants up there, and I don't want people sitting in the coffee shop in shorts and Birkenstocks because it's not the Class A building." And so it it wasn't until the demand changed that the people making the decisions about the leases said, "No, we need dogs and amenities for dogs. We need places our employees are no longer gonna wear suits and ties. We need places to bridge this moment between work and life because they're no longer separated." And it wasn't until then that, real estate's not the form real estate is not usually the pioneer. They usually have to react to the market, these larger REITs and real estate owners. And all of a sudden, then this same person shows up, in not shorts and Birkenstocks, but no longer a coat and tie, polo shirt, very casual, no socks. And because his boss now is younger than him. And so it was this moment of demand of no, this generation, we want something different from work than my father or my grandfather wanted because we see that separating life and work just is hard, and that's not what we want. We don't wanna build our work just on our life on work, we wanna build our life.
Mhm.
So, I think that that's where when we think about now having these conversations as opposed to in 2000, 2008, I think it's an easier conversation to have because I think a millennial generation has pushed the envelope and changed the market in ways no one could have imagined 20 years ago. No one would have even thought it would have happened.
I feel like some of what that is it used to be you'd go to work and then after work you'd find your joy and belonging and stuff, and now there is no after work, right? Or it's less and less. So if you're not fulfilled emotionally at work, you better figure that out because there's not a lot of time in the day after work. Um,
That's right. No, I mean, it's a great point where we're bridging this emotional need. We had separate boxes for everything. And I think this is where we get lost as a society of like, okay, I have mental illness or I have issues with my children or I'm having financial issues. And we used to compartmentalize that because we couldn't talk about it. Okay. And now we know we have to talk about it. So where are the safe places to do that? Now you can't do that every single day at your office, but you need to know that, hey, I've got to check in with my boss and I need to tell my boss, I just can't be there today. And it's not because I'm sick. It's because I need a mental health day or whatever it is. I need a day to like deal with stuff. And we can have those conversations today where I couldn't have them when I was a young professional in the 90s. There's no way I could call my boss and say, I don't I just don't feel like it today because I've got so many other heavier things to deal with.
I can't adult today. That's a valid thing to say to your boss, and the boss will say, "Yeah, I get it. Take care of yourself.
I know,
I'll see you tomorrow."
that's right. So, but a boss in the 1990s wouldn't. And so this is one of the most beautiful things about where we sit as a society in a developed country. Now, this doesn't happen everywhere, but you think what a luxury this is to begin to say we're not 95% of everything we do is emotionally driven. We've got to build a world that recognizes and allows us the flexibility and the need and the support of being that emotional being. I think we'd all be healthier if we could recognize that and build towards it.
Where did when you started thinking about this, the idea of return on emotion, in a context that is very used to thinking about return on investment on a economic standpoint, where did that come from for you? What did you see was missing? Like, what triggered this journey for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a series of triggers. So let me see if I can do it in a succinct way. Let me start with how I got there at the end, when I got there. So over my 20 years at the Downtown Austin Alliance, I was asked to kind of create new enterprises, whether it was a transportation management organization or the East 6th Street Public Improvement District. My one of my gifts is I'm an entrepreneur, and I love to start new concepts with a team. I love teams. And so I was asked to start a foundation for the organization, so a nonprofit. And with a nonprofit, you really have to think about the why. Who cares? Why does it matter? And you have to say, why would people give an organization that already has millions of dollars? Why would they give more money? And because it's geographically focused with a significant annual bank account, really who cares? Because there's children to feed and there's hospitals to take care of sick people and there's people who are unhoused. And so it really made me think about what's that equation? And so I always thought about it as kind of a living learning lab. Like we're living in this lab and what are we going to learn from it? And unless we understand the emotional side of it, there's really no why. I mean, honestly, do we need another park? Do we need another cafe? Do we need another event? Do we want them? Why do we want them? And who cares? And what are we doing? What's the impact? So that's kind of how I got there. Like, we've got to create this equation because we're starting this business and it doesn't make any sense. And I mean, still to this day, I think the foundation struggles with its why. And because I think foundationally, we still haven't gotten there about the fact that there is some meaningful work that we're doing that impacts people's lives that can make great change. But over the course of my many years in community development and a business owner, it really began to sink in on me at board meetings with our stakeholders at the Downtown Austin Alliance, with my husband and I as we were reviewing P&Ls for our businesses, thinking really about what does this all really mean? I mean, does it really just mean the P&L? Because if it does, I'm just done. I don't want to, that's not the work I want to
Mhm.
do. If I'm just making a lot of people rich and giving them great ideas for how to increase their investments, that's just not what I want to do. I don't really have, I could care less. What I'm doing as a community builder is I want to build places that enrich people's lives. That's why we built businesses. I mean, we had full time jobs. We're in a town of 8,000, now 14,000, east of Austin, kind of the poorer area of the community, and we didn't have retail. So my husband and I are like, well, if not us, then who? So we started a retail business and then we started another one. And it did enrich the lives of us first. I mean, totally changed our lives. And so many new friends and helped build community. And people got married and met at our store. They had babies. I mean, we
Oh.
just got to We got to meet people where they were and help build community as store owners, and that's when I think that's when things began to change about 14 years ago, where I was like, "Wait a minute, what is the meaning of all this?" Because I needed to have purpose, and I really needed to make sure that I knew that the other people in our industry felt the same way, and we were in it for the right reasons, but we just didn't know how to move it forward in a way that could really change the lives of our community. And I say this particularly in big cities after COVID, who cares? Who cares? Where I'm in a small town, if the tornado hit our town, I know who cares. If the tornado hit downtown XYZ, I always question who cares.
Mhm.
So I care. And that's why I had to dive into this.
If a city or a district optimizes for emotion, what changes?
I think what changes is the way we communicate and connect with other people first. Um, at the very core of it, you create meaningful relationships that extend beyond your job. I think that's first. I think second is once you've created those emotional connectors, it opens up space for things that can happen in ways you'd never expect. And I think, like I said, I was in Colorado Springs this week, and I was working with a business owner he's 80 years old. He's had this wonderful business, and we're looking to sell it and find a new generational owner to step in. And he's like, "Well, I'm really worried about missing." He has this little book nook area where people come in who might have had some hard things in their life, or they don't have anybody to talk to. I mean, he just created this naturally, and they share books and then they share conversations. And he said to me, "Where do I take this? This is what's enriched my life. I don't want to lose my book nook." It's this idea that meeting people from the heart, and listening and recognizing that selling the business is great, but what happens to John's heart when he's left? Where does that go, and where does that heart that he's created for his community go? And he's worried more about that than selling the business. That, to me, is at the heart of who we are as humans.
Thank you so much. This was really a great conversation. I think that's a perfect way to end it with John's book nook.
Chip, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Molly Alexander is the founder of Imagine the Possibilities Consulting and someone who has spent decades thinking deeply about the emotional life of communities, how trust, belonging, joy, and shared experience shape not only how we feel about places, but how we care for them. After the break, we're going to explore one place where that kind of civic emotion becomes almost impossible to miss. Once you start paying attention to return on emotion, you begin to see it everywhere, in rituals and gathering places, in the stories communities tell about themselves, and especially in the moments where strangers briefly stop feeling like strangers. And few places make that more visible than local sports. Not just the games themselves, but the rituals around them, the repeated gathering, the familiar faces, the shared language, the sense that for a few hours, a community is experiencing something together. In smaller cities especially, local teams can be something more than just entertainment. They become part of the emotional identity of a place, woven into memory, belonging, pride, and routine. So I wanted to explore that idea with someone who sees it up close every day.
Chris Murphy. I'm the Senior Vice President of Franchise Development for the Golden State Warriors. Part of that also has me as President of the Santa Cruz Warriors in the NBA G League.
And how long has the G League been in Santa Cruz? No.
We're coming up on our 15th anniversary season. So this year will be our 15th year in Santa Cruz, which is crazy to believe. This will be my 12th.
15 years and only one championship. That's a little weird.
And it was right before I got here. So just think of it that way.
It was when I was still there.
I am constantly reminded of that by my peers at Golden State that we haven't won a title since I got here.
What is a team mean to a city beyond basketball, beyond the sport? What does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, local sports can be they're a beacon, they're the convener, they're the cultural hub, they're the hub of the community, they're like the nowadays town center, right? You go to Kaiser Permanente Arena, you see people from all over the community, all different sizes, shapes, ages, colors. Like you see the true reflection of Santa Cruz, and the Central Coast, not just Santa Cruz. So you see that, and I think that's local sports. That's bringing people together. People are together to root on the local team, not just there to see an NBA level player, right? The basketball is great, but I think they're there to kind of build community and build relationships and support kind of everything together and unify. It really unifies things more than anything, right? What else can unify a community more than supporting your local sports team?
Yeah, how do you see that, man? I mean, I think you talk about the unification. It's both a shared identity and a shared experience. Because in the identity kind of goes beyond the arena, right? You're walking around town, you see people with your C-Dub gear. You're like, hey, we're part of the same community, which I think sports does that visually more than most things. You could argue just colleges. You can wear your college gear, but that's also tied to sports often. And then the shared experience. So, what is that shared experience? Because we're talking about a community, but we're also talking about strangers, right? And in some ways, I see it breaks down walls between strangers. What does that look like at Kaiser?
Yeah, I mean, I think that last thing you said there is what's really stands out to me a lot, right? That breaking down of walls. Like Santa Cruz is a community that has a lot of opinions. You have a lot of people on every side and somehow under and above the fence of every issue. But when they walk into that building, like you see people that would hate each other when they walk back outside based on beliefs. But when they're in that building, like everybody's high fiving. And I think, you reference so it does have the ability to unify people for a greater kind of positivity and a greater good. But what's also funny about local sports is like you reference it's strangers. And to some extent, yeah, like not all 2,500 people in the building know each other. But if you're a local to Santa Cruz, it is impossible to walk around that building and not see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people that you know. Like it takes forever for me to do a lap. That's not, that's because I live here and I've been a part of the community for a decade plus. It's not just because of my role with the Warriors. So I think you're the same, right? When you come back to a game, when you're there, you see so many people that are like, hey, what's up, Chip? And that's what's awesome is that there are strangers. There are a lot of different people from all over the community and outside of it that are there. But again, you literally see everybody you know. It's like the modern day water cooler.
Yeah. And at the same time, like when that magical moment happens at the end of the game or part of the game, like everyone in vicinity to you where you're sitting is your best friend, even if you've never seen
Totally.
them before. And you're hugging and high-fiving and you're part of it. So it is that community, which I think that exists when you go to Chase Center, you know, and Chase Center, you're not running into, everybody you might run into somebody, but it's a different experience. How else do you see that when you think about the difference between, because you're involved with the Warriors,
Mhm.
on different levels? How is the experience of the fan experience or the community experience different for a Golden State Warrior fan than it is for a Santa Cruz Warriors fan?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of the experience can be related to the venue. Like when you think about being a fan and going to a venue, a sporting event, like the venue creates a lot of your experience. I think one of the biggest differences between, Chase Center and in Kaiser Permanente Arena from an experience standpoint is you don't, people's experiences are a lot closer, or a lot more similar in our building, right? There's no luxury club. There's not, wide difference between the last row of the house and the first row. For our building, like the only delineating feature is like, do you have a back on your seat or not? And so literally like the people that spend the most in the building and the people that spend the least are like effectively 30 feet from each other. So you really like that experience. You're kind of all getting the same in-game entertainment, the same vibe, the same amenities. So it's a different experience than, being at Chase Center. And the sheer fact of having 18,000 plus people for a Valkyries or a Warriors game provides a lot of excitement and energy and adrenaline and volume. And they do some really cool experiences there for their fans. But at the end of the day, the person who has floor seats or first 5 rows, they also have a luxury club they're able to go to with amenities. They may have parking. There may be a lot of different things. That's a different experience than the person that sits in the last row of the building.
A lot of people stay, not everybody, but a lot of people stay completely loyal to their team, whether it's the team they grew up with or at some point they develop a relationship with the team. And then the team can suck, or you can move away, right, to another neighborhood. And like, why do people stay loyal? What is that like loyalty to a sports team? Where does that come from, do you think?
I think it's probably deep rooted in like human emotion and experiences, right? Like I can remember being a kid in the Carrier Dome and watching Billy Owens and John Wallace and Ronnie Cycli and like these, the core memories as a child. I think probably, or at whatever stage of fandom you became a fan of the team. Those are the things that I think is what causes what you're saying, where people stay so loyal is they have this emotional attachment and it brings you back to these pivotal moments or really high moments in like your childhood or your adulthood. Where you're like, man, I know exactly what I was doing. When Clay scored 37 and a quarter at Gold State, like I know where I was. I remember celebrating the first title, like these pivotal moments of excitement that only sports can bring out in you. I think that connection to those emotions that you felt when experiencing that sport, I think that's probably what leads to the loyalty, right? Like there's long after, who knows, 50 years from now, like I'm still going to be a Warrior fan no matter what. Like I spent 20 something years of my life here. There's some of the memories. I could go work for another team and I'd still probably be like, yeah, like it's in the blood now, right? So I think that loyalty is based on the emotion and the shared and the experiences you have, the memories you have. It may be connection to a family member, it may be things you experience with friends, but sports just brings out a joy that you don't forget those moments. And I think that probably harbors the loyalty more than anything.
Digging into that, I'm curious about when you're talking about it. One of the things you didn't talk about is the place, like the city, right? And for me, part of the reason I'm a Santa Cruz Warriors fan is all of the things you said. I remember going to see the games. I remember Kiwi. I remember Seth. I remember the good times. Like, and it's a relationship to Santa Cruz, right? And to me that ties in. So not to bring up Oakland, but Oakland has some hardcore fans for all their sports teams who have all left. Part of what is interesting to me is the relationship sports and local sports teams have with the city that they are hosted in, and how people build connections both with the sports team, but also in a lot of ways to the city through the sports team, right?
Yeah.
And so when that connection is broken, what happens to the loyalty and the allegiance and the attachment to the?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say like, to go back to my earlier point, like I think you're taking those same experiences and memories and that bond, and you're just taking them outside of the building, right? Like you go to for us, like people come to a Santa Cruz Warriors game, they park in and around the downtown, they go to a bar, they go to a restaurant, they create those memories before and after a game. So I think it's that entirety of the experience of going to a game that kind of deepens your connection to the downtown, right? You and I both know or have both heard from so many people locally, like, oh, I don't go downtown, right? Like I don't go downtown, but I'll go for a
Never
game.
heard that.
But yeah, exactly, right? And it's one of those things that's like when people get downtown, like downtown Santa Cruz is awesome. It's safe, it's vibrant, there's a lot of energy. Like people come down for a game and they're like, oh, this is if it was like this every night, it's like, no, it's kind of great. It's different though. Like when you're here on a game night, it is impossible to not feel the energy downtown. Everybody's in their gear, like you said. Every shop is packed, restaurants, bars. And I think that you do build a pride in a city with those moments to the extent of like what happens if a team relocates or stuff like that. I think I would probably say so much of that is dependent upon the how more than every situation being the same, right? You know, how not to throw shade on other teams in the Bay, but like, how a recent baseball team left and the agony of that might feel a little different than like, the Warriors moving across the water and retaining 90% of our season ticket holders that were in Oakland came with us, right? Like, there's a little difference there in the intentionality. Like, we still we still show up in the community in those areas, right? So I think how the organization goes about it probably lends to a bigger result than just the fact that somebody left.
Yeah. It's interesting as you were talking, I was thinking about the experience of seeing the game. Most people, if they're seeing a Santa Cruz Warrior game, they're going downtown and going to Kaiser Permanente Arena and watching the game. Most people who are watching a Golden State Warriors game, on the other hand, are either turning on their TV or going to the bar, and their experience is localized to their neighborhood bar, their sports bar, or wherever they are. So it's interesting just thinking about like the relationship to place. It's very different in a minor league team. No one's going to the sports
Totally.
bar to watch Santa Cruz Warriors, except maybe on championship game, like
Yeah.
6 of us will go, right? But
No,
but
it's a
the
fair. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
so
I
when
think
you go to the identity of the place you're in isn't necessarily Chase Center, but it's the Tempest bar with all my friends and our gear yelling at the television, right? So it's a
it's
very
that sense
different.
of unity. It's that sense of
Yeah,
community, like that shared, like, hey, we're C-Dub fans. Like, we stand for this same thing. Like, that's our thing. We're going to all cheer for. I mean, you see this across all sports and every different level. Like, go to a bar for an EPL game and it's like insane, right?
right.
So I think there's a lot there. Yeah.
So let me ask you about joy. My understanding is joy is one of the core values of the Warriors franchise, right? And I see it manifested on a good night when I watch the team play. Not always, but it definitely shows up and has shown up over the years. How important is that to building community as a franchise, and how does it manifest in your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I think joy from a building community standpoint, like, everybody, of course, wants to win first and foremost, right? Like, that's even the community would say that, but like, you can do that and have a good time, right? Like, seeing guys smiling and laughing and high fiving and Steph's funny little dances when he has a huge play, like, there's like, it just elicits a feeling that raises everybody's excitement even higher, and it makes you feel even that much more connected to these guys, right? Because they're not machines, they're humans. Those are raw emotions of joy that they play with, that fun and that passion. So I think there's a huge element tied to that same. It helps to build community versus if everything you looked at was just like a scowl on a face. Like, even if when things go well, if you were always just like straight face and stoic, it's just hard to like get that next fervent level of excitement, high fiving everybody around you when like the players aren't, and the players are stoic, right? So I do think that's a big part of it. How that manifests itself around the organization, that's a tough one. I think so much of it's just dependent upon the day, the time, in general. Like, for me as a culture, like, I try to live in a world where like we work extremely hard, but we keep it lighthearted and we play hard and have fun, right? Nobody makes more bald jokes about me than I do. Like, and I think when you kind of lower the temperature sometimes, you realize and you help people realize, like, we go to work, for me anyway, from a joy perspective, like, I go to work every day at some level to talk about basketball. Like, if I can't bring a smile and excitement to that, the people on the other side of the phone or in the community or whoever we engage with, like, they're not going to be joyous. So I think there's a piece of bringing the energy and the fun and the excitement. Of course, it's easier when the team's playing better, right? Or the day after Steph goes for 50, right? Everybody wants to be excited. But I think that in the building from a performance standpoint of the team, I think the way the bond between the community and the player, they feel more human when they're laughing about a huge play or a bank shot on a three or something, like, and they're not sitting there all like like, they're laughing, they're smiling, they're high fiving, they're hugging. Like, I think it humanizes these guys more, and in my opinion, brings the fan even closer. Like, oh, like, that was pretty funny they did that, or that was pretty amazing they did that.
I want to ask you one more thing. You came to Santa Cruz for this role.
Mhm.
What have you learned about community through the Santa Cruz Warriors?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think I've learned a lot, and it's also just reinforced some things I feel like I was already aware of. But Santa Cruz has, and a lot of local communities, like, have a lot of pride in, like, the local, right? In supporting each other. And I think what we've learned in these smaller communities from a sports team perspective is, like, these communities support us relentlessly, right? And we want to show up and support them as well. And when we do that, it can make a huge impact, right? Yes, we're the G League. I'm not bringing Steph Curry to a community event, but when our point guard shows up, kids go crazy, everybody goes nuts. So, like, you can really build a bond with the community just by being present and supporting it, right? Like showing up at the, at the pride parade, showing up at schools to read, like any way you can, showing up and being available and kind of bringing the joy that we get to bring. When we show up, there's joy, right? I think that's a great thing that we bring to the community, but it's also something that this community has supported us from day one, right? And supported us relentlessly. And it's incumbent upon us to return that favor. But I think that bond you can build with the community, like, there's nothing like people. When I'm in the community, I go to the grocery store, like, people don't know what my role is, but how often I'm always wearing something Warriors, and more often than not, somebody's like, go see Dubs or whatnot. That little bond that you can make, it's fun. It's exciting. It always elicits a smile, right? It's what you said earlier about joy and excitement. But what I've learned is, like, when you show up for people, people show up for you, whether or not you're not asking for it, they're not asking for it. But I think that the better citizens and stewards we are for Santa Cruz, we all strengthen Santa Cruz together in the community. But people have even a bigger bond, and they grow a closer, tighter connection because our point guard read to their kid at school, or they saw us doing a river cleanup, or they did a beach cleanup with us, or they did X or Y or Z. Like, they see us as part of the community and giving back, and it kind of builds it strengthens that bond even more. And it always is in a way that just uplifts Santa Cruz. It's strengthening kind of what the future of Santa Cruz is and what the current of Santa Cruz is. And that's just something that's hard to replicate.
There are moments when a city feels fractured, moments where trust erodes, when fear settles in, when a place begins to lose its sense of itself. In David Talbot's book, Season of the Witch, the reader is taken through the 1970s in San Francisco and an almost unbearable cascade of collective trauma. Altamont, the Zodiac killings, the Manson murders, Jonestown, the assassinations of Harvey Milk and George Moscone. A city that had once imagined itself as the epicenter of peace, freedom, creativity, and possibility suddenly found itself exhausted, grieving, cynical, fractured. And then, January 10th, 1982, the NFC Championship game. The San Francisco 49ers versus the Dallas Cowboys. But in Talbot's telling, this wasn't just football. This was symbolic. The Cowboys were America's team, polished, established, mythical. Coach Tom Landry in his suit and fedora, disciplined, traditional, militaristic in his authority. And across the field stood Bill Walsh in the 49ers, a newer team, a different California, creative, unconventional, diverse, a reflection in many ways of the Bay Area itself. And for those few hours, the entire region was glued to the game. Not just sports fans, everyone. In bars and living rooms, in neighborhoods across San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, rich and poor, young and old, hippies and bankers, longshoremen and tech workers before tech workers were even a thing. An entire region holding its breath together. And as the game slipped towards its final moments, it felt like everything was hanging there with it. Not just a season, not just a team, something emotional, something civic, something bigger. Late in the dramatic fourth quarter, trailing by 6, Joe Montana rolled to his right, chased by defenders, and lofted a desperate pass towards the back corner of the end zone. The ball and San Francisco's underdog Super Bowl hopes seemed impossibly out of reach. Dwight Clark leapt. And at that instant, Candlestick Park exploded. But what Talbot captures so beautifully is that explosion didn't stop at the stadium walls. For a brief moment, an entire fractured region experienced the same feeling at the same time. Joy, relief, hope, belonging, connection. a community remembering itself together. And maybe that's part of what return on emotion really is. Not just simple happiness or entertainment, not just being greeted at the door, but the understanding that emotion is not separate from civic life. It's how we experience it. And that the moments we carry with us most deeply are often the ones that remind us we are part of something larger than ourselves. Sidewalk Ballet is a production of Big Creative Consulting, strengthening community through culture and place. These conversations exist because our cities, neighborhoods, downtowns, and public spaces aren't shaped by one discipline alone. They depend on people willing to ask thoughtful questions, challenge assumptions, and imagine new possibilities together. At Big Creative Consulting, that's exactly what we help communities and organizations do every day. So if your district, organization, project, or city is navigating change, or you simply want to start a big creative conversation about where your community could go next, visit Big Creative Consulting to learn more or schedule a conversation. Contributors include Abra Allen, Josh Yeager, and myself. Engineering by Ryan Musanti. The Sidewalk Ballet theme and original music are by the Peacoat Project. We'd love to hear from you with feedback, guest recommendations, or episode ideas. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, or email community@sidewalkballet.com. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who cares about the future of communities and public life. I'm Chip. Thanks for joining us on this block of the Sidewalk Ballet. I'll see you downtown.